In this video, I'm going to be going through communication for the preliminary HSC for engineering studies. So this is the Year 11 course. This is Chapter 1 of Year 11. This is also what I'll assess in the first assessment task in your mid-course review in Year 11. Now, for communication, there's 4 main areas, and these are things you have to learn about and things that you're going to learn to do. These are the things we're going to assess that you can do these things. Now, the first, there's 4 general areas. So it says here, freehand sketching in 3-dimensional and third angle projection. So these here, these different drawings, they're 3 different ways of showing a shape 3-dimensionally. I don't really like this one. I'm going to talk about in a second how it's it's much harder to do this version. That's probably a little bit better. You know, never mind. Okay. So actually, that's all the better that I get rid of that last one. Okay. So it says identify third angle projection over here. That's one of the things you need to do. Now, third angle projection is this version of drawing a picture here. It's an orthogonal. So I'm going to label these just so we can move on and know what's going on here. Because we've got some words here, freehand orthogonal and 3-dimensional pictorial drawings. Okay, so actually I have here, these are the 3 different kinds of pictorial drawings. I have perspective, these are from my notes. I have perspective, isometric, and oblique. I didn't draw the, I'm going to take one more crack at the, there we go, that's a bit better. At the perspective. The whole point is perspective is hard to draw. Now I might ask you to identify which of these, but realistically we don't do perspective in the engineering studies course. It's just too difficult to do without a computer. I might get you to do it as a Google Classroom, a Google SketchUp thing, but generally not something we consider in the course. So when we're talking about 3-dimensional or pictorial drawings, we're interested in these 2. This one here, as we can see over here, is isometric. This one here is oblique. And this one down here is orthogonal. Now, the syllabus says you need to be able to identify third angle projection orthogonal. What that means is, in the case of my brick, that I've shown a brick here with some hidden detail. We don't cover hidden detail at this point, so I'm going to ignore that. So the reason we show hidden detail is to let people know that there's hollows in these bricks. Right? There's circles that have been from where the brick has been extruded. For us, we're going to ignore that. We're just going to show it. If you look at the brick from the top, you can see 3 holes. If you look at it from the front, you can just see a rectangle. And if you look at it from the side, you see a square or a more square rectangle. Now, the thing is, in Australia, if I have this object, and I've labelled the yellow section here as the top, I don't know if that shows up very well, I'm going to put it here. Hopefully it shows up better here. If I've said that this yellow area is the top, oh, there we go. Hopefully that shows up now. If I said that that's the top, and that this is the front, and that this red side here is the side, well, when we would draw this, I have a box. If I was to draw each of those faces on this, if I was to draw each of those faces in this acrylic container that I've made, what I'd end up producing is something where the top view is on top, the front view is below that, and then the side view is to the side. Now, this is really important that in Australia we use this is called third angle projection. Now in other countries this is flipped around. In other countries they draw it like this. Well, no, they don't draw it. They draw the side view down here. I don't want to get too far. I don't want to focus too much on what you don't need to do. I might do that in more detail in class, but the point is, in Australia, we draw the top view on top. That is the key focus that we want to remember here. So when it says identify third angle projection, that means the top view is on the top. If you remember that, that should get you through the exam. In France, the top view is in the middle, right? So the front view is on top. Okay, so, or Europe and other non-speaking countries, they use first angle projection. So, The next thing is you need to be able to draw freehand, orthogonal, and three-dimensional pictorial drawings of objects. So I've just drawn here some freehand drawings. The key things that you need to know is that when you draw these, that you need to make sure that you've got your angles correct. So to do this, what you'll probably do is you'll use set squares, and I don't have a set square, but I'm trying to demonstrate an angle. That for me, what I really should be doing is when I draw these, is I want to have my angles for an isometric need to be at 30 degrees. And so what I'm going to draw is, for the isometric drawing, I'm going to draw something here called the crow's foot. And what the crow's foot does is it says, this is 30 degrees on this side, and this is 30 degrees on that side. It's called isometric because it's an equal measure. So over here, this is 30 degrees, and this is 30 degrees. So that's fairly important. It only needs to be close. For a freehand sketch, I'm not going to be too fast as long as you've shown the general concept. For oblique, we just draw one side shifted off to 45 degrees. So that gives you a fairly good idea of what we need to do. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is, so freehand orthogonal drawings. With freehand orthogonal drawings, it's just important that these sides line up. So the top view needs to be directly in line with the front view. The side view needs to be directly in line with the side view. If you've done graphics, then this will probably make a lot of sense, and this will be intuitive to you, and you probably don't need to worry too much about this. Obviously, I'm going to go through these things in greater detail. I've already recorded lots of videos where I've got details on how to draw orthogonal drawings to third angle projection. I have another set. My most watched video is on pictorial drawings. I also have quite a lot of resources on AutoCAD and how to do these drawings there, and that gives, I think, still some good perspective. Okay, I'm going to move on. So we've now talked about what we need to draw. Before I move on, though, I will say that what am I expecting? Well, I would expect that if I had an object like this, I might ask you to draw this object, for example, for in either orthogonal or isometric. The same thing for this. Now, it doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be close. I guess I'll give a quick advantage. I'll take this shape here, which is a bit more unusual. So if I was drawing this in orthogonal, I'd have to draw the top view, which I've said is yellow on first. So I've drawn the top view. Directly below it, I need to draw the front view, which is blue. And then I'm going to draw the side view. Now the side view, it needs to flip from the direction of the box. It needs to flip from the direction of this box. So if I had this box, and this is something I will have done in more detail in class later, it needs to flip from the side direction of this box. So from this box here, it's going to look like that. Now, that's all I need. I might make that worth 3 marks, for example. If I asked you instead to draw that, I'll just make that a little bit cleaner. So what often people do is they'll draw it lightly, and then they'll go over it with a darker pencil. I will go into a lot of detail in this later, but I'm giving you I want to run down this quickly. If I was going to draw this as a isometric, what I would do is I'd first draw my 30-degree crow's foot. 30 degrees, 30 degrees. And once I've drawn my 30-degree crow's foot, I would then draw my shape. That's a little bit off. Now, that's what I would be expecting for, again, maybe 3 marks at year 11 level without a ruler. What I might do is for even less marks, I might have another drawing where I've said, given this top view, complete the missing parts of the drawing. I do often I might ask you to draw something like a brick, I might say draw a brick with 3 holes in it, just from a written description. Or what is the other thing I do? I might say like a letter, like I might say draw the letter H. That's something I've done in the past. So I might give you lined paper to help. I've done that in the past as well, to help you draw freehand. Okay, so I'm now going to move on to this next dot point, which is about research methods. Now with research methods, you've already done some research as part of chapter 1 in that you had to write the innovation impacts. The impacts of a specific innovation. So that was a research task that you've already done, but we also need to know, students need to conduct research using computer technologies and other resources. So this is using textbooks, and these days the internet is a fairly important resource. When I get to Copeland's notes, I will talk about Wikipedia. Okay, so the next one we're going to get to is about collaborative work practices. I talk about this in my textbook, my notes, but what I would say here is that there's 3 main reasons why we want to work collaboratively. The first is that when we work collaboratively, we get more skills from different people. So if you have on your team an electrical engineer, a civil engineer, and a hydrology engineer, that's a civil engineer, and a mechanical engineer, you've got a lot of different skills happening at the same time. I'll use the example of railways. In a railway team, there's usually a civil engineering manager, there's an electrical engineering manager for the electrical supply to, if it's an electrified railway. There'll be a signalling, which is a telecommunications engineer who's in charge of that aspect of the project. So there are 3 specialties within railways. If you have overhead wiring can also be considered mechanical. So more skills. It's just no one person can know that much about all those things. The next reason why you might want to have more people on a team is more perspectives. This is important culturally, that the more different kinds of people, the more people from different backgrounds. If you have old people, young people, if you have men and women, if you have people who have grown up in Australia and people who have grown up in overseas, you're more likely to have people say, hey, that's a really good design, but if you considered that these sorts of people, say maybe people with accessibility issues, they're going to have trouble accessing this project. So maybe we should have some ramps. Maybe we should consider these needs or these parts of the community. Okay, so that's more perspectives. And then the last one, this is probably the most important, is there's just only so many hours in the day. So if you have a project that's going to take 10,000 hours of human labour to produce, well, that's going to be finished a lot faster if you have 100 people working on the project. So you can just do more. They're the 3 main reasons why you want to work collaboratively. Now, I have a video from Casually Explained which talks about group work, and I think that's actually a pretty good a good look at why group work is important. It also talks about, I use that as an example to talk about management strategies when you work collaboratively. But so we've now talked about appreciate the value of teamwork. But if I asked you for 3 different reasons why teams work collaboratively, this is what you might say. The last one is engineering reports and their significance to engineering practice. So in this course we're going to have to do 3 engineering reports, 4 engineering reports, but I will have 3 of them be assessment tasks. And I'm going to talk very briefly about the standard. Because I'm not setting an engineering report in this chapter, I probably won't ask any questions on this in the first assessment task, but it's still important that I go through quickly, and that's covered in my notes. So with that said, we'll now look at my notes, and I'll quickly look at what Copeland has to say to mention things like Wikipedia. Okay, so in my notes, I talk about the importance of freehand sketching and why I talk about why freehand sketching is important. I talk about what you're allowed to take into the exam, so that's fairly important. At this stage, what I would suggest if you're watching this in preparation for the exam, I would say really you need a protractor because I'm only going to be assessing on freehand. But a ruler and generally a set of set squares is a really good idea. The next thing is I have identifying pictorial drawings. So can you put the lids on those two? I have 1, 2, 3 different kinds of pictorial drawings. I expect that you can recognize those, and I expect that you would know things like that this is a 30-degree angle and that this is a 45-degree angle. I would expect that. Now, I might ask questions on why we use different methods. So these are things that we've discussed when we went through these notes. The reason why we tend to favour the isometric drawing is because we can draw these circles with ellipse templates, which we're allowed to take into the exam. This circle here is very hard to draw, so we tend not to use that. The advantage of oblique drawings is that if you have a shape with only one circle, then it's actually a lot easier to draw. It's actually very easy to draw oblique drawings. The fact is that most HSC exams, they'll deliberately put 2 circles in here so that you're better off learning how to do isometric, and we don't really focus on oblique very much, despite that advantage. Perspective, they look the most natural, but they're very hard to produce without a computer. Orthogonal drawings, they have a top view, front view, side view. Now they don't have to have all 3, they usually have at least 2. In Australia, we must use third angle projection. This means that the top view is on top. In this case here, we have a Lego man and we're showing the dimensions. Dimensions is very important, but we're not covering that as part of Chapter 1. For engineering reports, I talk about why they're important. They're important so that people can reference your information and they can determine the source and reliability of your information. They can say, hey, that sounds really good, but if I'm skeptical or if I want to find out more, where am I going to find out that information? The structure of your engineering report, for me, this should include things like a title, contents page, numbered headings and subheadings. It should have numbered pages. Diagrams, sketches are fairly important. It's pretty hard to write an engineering report without providing some detail that's a pictorial detail. And it must include referencing. A guide is provided by Bob Wee. I think it'd actually be R. Wee because it's Robert, I presume, but from the University of Wollongong. The last thing I think here is working collaboratively, and I've talked about those benefits, and I have casually explained there. The last thing I'm going to talk about in this video is I'm going to talk about Paul Copeland's Engineering Studies, The Definitive Guide. This is volume 1, and in that book he talks about communication, so it talks about the importance of freehand sketching. So I will go into, I have videos where I talk about pictorial drawings, and I have provided my methods of producing an object. He's showing an iron, and he's saying this is how you could produce an iron using, first of all, drawing a box and then filling in the shape within that box. That's a good strategy. I've got resources where I talk about how I draw pictorial drawings. Here it talks about how in Australia we use third angle projection, which is represented by a symbol that looks a bit like this. I will have covered this in more detail where I go through the Victorian, the standard from the Victorian government. They have the VCE handbook for technical drawing. And I also reference the Australian standard, but what we want to focus on at this level is we want to know that this top view needs to be directly above the front view. The side view needs to be directly above. I say this all the time, and I still have Year 12 students who get this wrong. Who draw, they draw the side view, but they draw the side view up here for some reason. Right? And it doesn't line up. It needs to line up. Yeah, these things need to be directly above. Yeah, they need to line up. That's really important. And if you put the top view below, or if you put the top view over here, right? If you did the top view over here, you're going to lose marks. So that's really important there. So this diagram you can see here is very similar to what we saw before, that my Perspex model. It's the same concept, it just doesn't have the side. And that helps it to explain the third angle projection. Has some details on engineering reports and a note on Wikipedia. So I will finish with talking about Wikipedia. So for a HSC level, my gold standard for a reference is that it should end in .edu, a website. So assuming you get information from a website, if it doesn't come from a .edu or similar. So when I say .edu, that could obviously be .au, or it could be the UK's equivalent, which is .ac for academia, .uk. It could be something like that. But if it doesn't end in that, the other option is it can end in .gov, and obviously .gov.au. I'll accept something that has .gov.au or .gov. The problem is that some things like France, for instance, they don't use these endings. Everything ends in .fr. So something could come from a university, but the university will come from .fr. So I say it's a good guideline, but it's not an absolute rule. Sometimes you will not be able to find a reference that has a .edu website, and that's fine. It just means that you need to apply some critical thinking to say, does this seem like a reliable source? I used to have a website, I used to own the website, plasticscausecancer.com. And if you went to that website, it just said, no, they don't. That was it. I had a couple of links where I defended the statement that they don't cause cancer. Or typically, in general practice, they don't cause cancer. But the point is, anyone can create whatever they want. So for instance, I could create the Vaccine Council of Australia. Well, I think that one's already taken. And I'm pretty sure it's taken by some people who don't really believe in vaccines, which I feel is ironic. But a lot of people, I think, would go there thinking, well, the Vaccine Council of Australia, that sounds very official, but anything that's in a .com or .org, literally anyone can buy that for $10 a year or $20 a year these days. Wikipedia, there are some amazing things that you see on Wikipedia. I remember once being on Wikipedia and seeing that it just said, for the entry on tigers, it says, tigers are not the largest land cat or something like that. They are stupid. That was it. That was all it said. Now, luckily for me, I knew that I can just go back to the Wikipedia history, and I was able to see the full page that had been put there beforehand. But I have won bets in the past. In the early days of Wikipedia, I won bets by changing the Wikipedia entry, getting my money, and then showing to my friend that I had changed the entry. And you could see the entry where the exact line that they were looking for was deleted by me 5 minutes earlier. The thing is, these days, I have set challenges. The most recent one to my classes, I said that if you can make the entry on elephants say that the average weight of an adult elephant is, well, the average mass of an adult elephant is 50 kilograms, I'll provide a prize. And it needs to be up there for 15 minutes. I then demonstrated that I changed it on every entry I could find: African elephant, African bush elephant, Indian elephant, elephant, whatever, the Tame Impala song, elephant, anything I could. And what I found is that when I put in this change, within about 15 minutes I got an edit and then eventually a ban, and then the school was no longer allowed to use their IP address to edit Wikipedia. So the point is that I think Wikipedia is a very reliable source on most things. Some political issues, they can be tough. So for instance, issues on like China and Taiwan, that's a very politically difficult, it's very difficult to have a political stance on those things. And those things, I could say that Wikipedia maybe is not the best source there. But generally, especially for things to do with engineering, I think Wikipedia is an excellent source. And it just can't be used in your report, right? Because it's the same way that you can't use Encyclopedia Britannica. You're supposed to go to the original source and quote the original source. And Wikipedia is great because it provides all of those sources at the bottom of the page. So you can follow that up and you can see where that's come from. Okay, that's what I have to say about preliminary Chapter 1 communications.